I am so excited to be filming today, and it's something that I hadn't felt in a while because I'd been so exhausted. And so I want to share something that, as a person who has struggled with depression and continues to do so and will continue to do so, it's a chronic thing, it's for life. I want to share something that changed my life a lot, and that is asking myself the question, am I sad? Or am I just exhausted? Because you would be surprised how often the answer is, I'm just exhausted. Hello everybody, I'm Roxy, this is Chaotic Bibliophile, and today I want to tell you about the books that I read in November. But first, I really wanted to mention this thing because I've been doing okay, everything's fine, but I've also been super tired, and some days that's reflected on my mood. And yesterday I just crashed. I slept so much. I still got some things done, but I mainly just slept, and I felt a bit bad about it, but also I knew what my body needed, and I realized that today I'm in such a great mood, and it's just because I was so tired and now I'm not. So I just want to encourage everyone out there to just allow yourselves to rest, because if you're like me and you take on a lot, sometimes it can be hard to find those pauses. By the way, I'm not saying depression isn't real. Believe you me, I know it is. I'm just saying rest is good. Give yourself some time to recharge. Okay, let's get on to the books. One of them I gave back to the library. So let's start with that one. And that is Fear and Loathing in Las Vegas by Hunter S. Thompson. I will put it here. This is gonzo journalism about a guy being hooked on drugs and going to Las Vegas, exploring Vegas with his lawyer. And it's a classic and it's not very good. Hunter S. Thompson can definitely write when he takes the time to analyze what he's written and what he's been going through. It's great. And I also really enjoyed one part that was just transcript of his tapes, which is kind of contradictory to what I'm saying, but the in-between where he does not take any steps back, but also it's not an immediate experience. It's just so blah. It's very macho. It's very unoriginal. Also, I can understand that in context, this sort of exposed the lie that is the American dream, and how Las Vegas is this hole of depravity that sort of fosters the worst of the American dream and capitalism. I understand the importance. I just think the writing is very meh. He wanted true gonzo journalism to be just the facts as they were occurring without any editing. And if you follow me, you know that I think editing is very good. Exposés like this have been done better since. I am so glad I checked it out of the library. Yeah. Moving on to another book that I won't say a lot about because I already filmed an entire video about it, is Childhood by Tove Ditlevsen. This is the first installment in the Copenhagen trilogy, and I am very much looking forward to continuing on with the series, especially after someone commented on that video that the other two are even better. And this is, by the way, translated by Tiina, Nunnally, and Michael Favala Goldman. I really enjoyed it. I don't think it's perfect or for everyone necessarily, but I did think it was super good, and it has many things that I am curious to continue investigating through the rest. So I will link that video down below so you can check it out. I just dove right in, and I forgot to mention something that is sort of the core of this video and this month. So this is a November wrap-up. It is not a non-fiction November wrap-up because I really failed at non-fiction November. I only completed one book out of the 4 that Danny had said on that TBR. I will link that down below. I did read a lot, but it was kind of a meh month. There were a lot of books that I felt very meh about, and there were a lot of books that I really didn't like. But the main thing is that I did not read a lot of nonfiction, and I did not complete the 4 books that I really wanted to complete. And it was so doable as well. It's just that some stuff happened in November and my time got significantly cut down. I will try to complete those books as soon as possible because they were books that I really want to read still. But yeah, this wrap up therefore is not nonfiction November, is just November. but there was a lot of nonfiction, so an attempt was made, including the next book, which is a DNF. This is 50 Sounds by Polly Barton, which is a very beloved collection of essays on the Japanese language. But that's the problem, it's not really on the Japanese language. I was buddy reading this with Nunnally from Curious Reader, and we were having fun discussing and complaining about this book, but I tapped out because I have no patience for books that I really don't want to read. This is organized into 50 sounds because the main thesis of the book is that Polly Barton, who has become a very prominent translator of Japanese literature, she says that Japanese is an onomatopoeic language, so she really wants to grasp the language from those sounds, and she sort of explains what the sounds are, but language is not really the focus. I mean, it is at some points. The most interesting parts of this book are where she takes the time to delve into ideas of what language is and what communication is. She engages with Wittgenstein, which is super interesting. She has some Rachel Cusk in there, which by the way convinced me to read Rachel Cusk, because before I was like, yeah, she's an author that I would maybe get to at some point because she's so relevant, but I am not sure if she's for me. And after reading that quote, I'm like, yes, I really want to read Rachel Cusk. But other than that, I just really didn't gel with Polly Barton's writing style. She's so dry. My problem with her is that she has all these amazing opportunities for which she's always vastly unprepared. And she admits to it, which is fair, but nothing comes out of it. She takes these digressions about her life that are not very interesting and are not framed in any way that feels productive. And she's just so uncurious about everything. There is really no sense of wonder in this collection at all. I was not enjoying it, therefore I did not continue reading it. A book I also feel very ambivalent about, but I still enjoyed, is Europa by Han Kang, translated of course by Deborah Smith. This is part of the Stranger Express Yoyu collection. And this is about this woman who's been having nightmares, and her very fraught friendship / romantic relationship with, I think you could describe her as a trans woman, but also it could be that she's just a cross-dresser. It's very complicated, and because the perspective is from the other woman who's having all these nightmares, it's kind of hard to tell. I thought some of these bits were very interesting, but it did feel very diffuse. It is very nightmarish and not being aware of what's going on. I liked it because I like the prose. I like Han Kang's writing style, at least as I have come to know it from Deborah Smith. Oh, and also I've read Han Kang translated into Spanish, so it's not just Deborah Smith, but I think of all the things I've read by her, this is my least favorite. That said, I would reread it again. But if you're looking to start with Han Kang, I would definitely recommend either Human Acts or The Vegetarian. Although this has already fallen apart as a concept, I will still talk about all the fiction that I read for one reason or another. That reason is uni, let's be honest. Then I will talk about the nonfiction to pretend I had a semblance of a decent nonfiction November. The Wasteland by T.S. Eliot. This is the facsimile and transcript of the original drafts, including the annotations of Ezra Pound, edited by Valerie Eliot. This is a very cool edition with the original manuscript typed out, and if you are really into the Wasteland, you can read it. And as an exercise, I think it is interesting, but I am not a big enough fan of The Wasteland to want to keep this. I actually would recommend that you read The Wasteland in a smaller format, either with lots of notes or just no notes other than the ones provided originally by T.S. Eliot, because it's just more fun. This way it's too dense, I think. But it is fun to know, what stuff Pound cut and how a poem that is considered one of the most important literary products of the 20th century is actually much more of a collaborative effort than we often would like to think, especially because T.S. Eliot is considered such a genius. But what Pound cut definitely needed to be cut. Another book I read for uni, 10-4 by Ben Lerner. This is my first Ben Lerner. I definitely want to read more, but I didn't love this very much. I'm still debating whether to keep this or not. This is autofiction, a guy very much like Ben Lerner investigates what it means to write and having time to write and having the privilege to write. I just feel like I've read this novel several times and I've read better versions of it. So for example, if you read A Line Made by Walking by Sara Baume, that novel is absolutely brilliant. If you've read Art by Zadie Smith, I don't think that is perfect, but I think it's still better. This also has pictures and they were just there. I don't think they added anything to the novel. So although I admit that this type of autofiction can be interesting and can be a good project, I was not very impacted by this version of that project. A book that I liked much more and that I do want to reread is NW by Zadie Smith. I think this might have been a proof copy because it has like some mistakes, but I picked it up at a church sale in Santiago years and years ago, and I never read it because that's me, and I finally read it for uni. I really love this. It's about two women who have been friends for a long time. One of them has gone on to become super successful. She has children, she has a house, she has a good income. And then the other, although she has not done poorly for herself, she's still like very much middle class. She sort of takes a bit of shame being comfortable. In her eyes, she's not very, but she is. Both these stories are interrupted by the story of someone who is actually lower class. And all of them are Black, by the way. So it kind of investigates racism, but also how class factors into this and how they are differently assessed in relation to their class. It is so fascinating. I really love the writing style, as I said, especially the dining scenes, because it really made me feel like I was watching a film and I could hear the rustling while they were eating and the chatter, and I could see the camera focusing on them. I don't know, it was very particular. I really liked it. There is also a section when they are investigating the more successful woman, who, by the way, even changed her name, which, you know, relates to ideas of being self-made. It's very interesting how it talks about authenticity and what authenticity or being the real you is in this capitalist society. Very good stuff. But yeah, there is a section where it's almost like an itemized list of things. I really love that section. I thought it was so fun, but also purposeful, insightful, and funny in the best of ways. What I would say in regards to that is that all the modes of narration here can sometimes feel a bit gimmicky. I don't know if all of them are equally justified, is what I mean. I still enjoyed this novel. I want to read more Zadie Smith, although I'm not sure I will do that soon. If you have any recommendations, please do let me know. A book that I can acknowledge was very good, but not for me, was Invisible Man by Ellison. This is the story of this invisible man who is, of course, a Black man in the 20th century, and all his tribulations going about life, moving from the South to the North, going to uni, going to this factory, and then finally landing in Harlem. And it's, of course, mostly about race and all these different dimensions of race and how internalized racism operates and can we be liberated of that. It starts off being very uncanny, which I really enjoyed. It has this mode of narration where you are wondering whether there is something supernatural going on or not. But then it sort of fizzles out. The uncanny element definitely continues, but the mode of narration doesn't. It feels very much a realist novel. More than that, it feels like a picaresque episodic novel. And I realized that's just not for me. I felt very similarly to The Adventures of Augie March by Saul Bellow, who, by the way, blurbs this book. It says it's brilliant. And it is, objectively, it is very well constructed, except perhaps the transition between episodes. But in general, the writing is excellent and the commentary is excellent. I have no complaints in those departments. It's just that I don't very much enjoy episodic novels of this kind. I think interconnected short stories are different, and maybe, I don't know, because I've always wanted to read the Pickwick Papers, and I know that is very much episodic. But in this case, it just felt too long because it's the same character. After a while, I was just like, okay, here we go again. And of course, there was a lot of misogyny, especially near the end, which I also didn't enjoy, but I would read more Ralph Ellison. I think his other novels are shorter and tighter, so maybe that will help. But if you enjoy episodic narratives that are not sweeping in a Steinbeck sense, for example, but are very long and you like to follow characters through these different scenarios, I think you should check this out because, as I said, the writing is very good and the episodes themselves are very interesting. My favorite was the one at university. Of course, it's a space that I engage a lot in and I'm very interested in, and I love campus novels. What happens there made me so angry, but also it felt very true to life with a very fun, interesting narrative style. So I would definitely recommend this for that. Yeah, check it out. It is a classic and I understand why it's very, very good. It's just, I don't think it's necessarily for me. Now moving on to the nonfiction. So sorry for the angle shift. I had to pause the recording and now I'm back. So that's why the light is different. That's why the angle is different. I actually like this angle much more, which saddens me. But hey, so as I was saying, nonfiction November reads. This would have been much better if I had saved all my nonfiction reads for this. Let's start with the only bad one, Abstract Expressionism by David Anfam. If you listen to our podcast, the Book Crumbles Pod, link down below as always, so you can check it out because it's really fun. This was just such a meh disappointment. It looks like a really nice book with lots of images, and I got this because I had a seminar on abstract expressionism and this was one of the recommended reads. This promised to be an introduction to abstract expressionism and I found it so dry and boring and kind of not a proper introduction. I felt like David Anfam assumed a lot of knowledge but then explained a lot of things that had to do with basic art knowledge. So I don't really know who this is for. I have nothing else to say about this. Beautiful as this is and as cheap as this was less than £10, which for a book of this quality is nice. I would be interested perhaps in checking out other books in these collections by Thames and Hudson. I will be getting rid of this because I am never going to reread it. Made me crave some actually good art writing. Let's talk about The Salt Path now by Raynor Winn. And this is a memoir. Raynor Winn lost her house from a bureaucratic mistake. It was a really awful situation which could have been prevented, but it was just one of those things. And at the same time, her husband of decades was diagnosed with a degenerative disease and everything felt like it was crumbling around them. So Raynor came up with this idea of walking the coastal path because they were homeless anyways, and that's what they set out to do. This has been hailed as amazing nature writing, and I really think it is not. I don't think there are lots of landscape descriptions and there are not lots of reflections on landscape. And so I was very disappointed to find out that this is not really nature writing, in spite of what everyone says. That said, I did find it fascinating from a memoir perspective, the discussions on homelessness and what homelessness means, especially in regards to other people, the reactions everyone around them had, both negative but also sometimes really kind. That was fascinating. And also just ideas of homelessness and what it means to be homeless. It really reminded me of the address book by Deidre Mask. In that book, there is the discussion of the problem of homeless people. It's not only that they don't have a place to live, it's also that it's really hard to get out of that situation because of all the things you are denied and all the stigma and implications that comes with it. And so those discussions I found super valuable. I also really enjoyed just the idea of being older and undertaking this risk. Sometimes I did not necessarily agree with her perspective. I think she has a very different worldview from mine. She is much more emotional and impulsive, but I did value her honesty and her drive, and I was just along for the ride. I do recommend it for a memoir. If you're looking for nature writing, I would say look somewhere else, because although this is set in a nature landscape, I don't think it has a lot of nature writing in it, and I think it's a bit deceitful to sell it as that But, you know, the book itself was good. A book that I absolutely devoured, 7.5 Lessons About the Brain by Lisa Feldman Barret. I want to read so much more by her because I adored her writing. This is exactly what it says on the tin. It's a collection of 7.5 essays on the brain and neuroscience and telling us what neuroscientists are doing. And I learned things that I was taught during my neuroscience course. Granted, it was intro to neuroscience and it is now a couple of years old, but still, I was shooketh. I was like, I have been deceived, bamboozled. I think this is a great place to start with neuroscience / brain studies / cognitive science. If you want to know more about the brain and how it works, the way she writes about it is so pedagogic, not dumbing it down at all, but very engaging and accessible. And it's also very short, and the notes are really, really helpful, and they contain a lot of precisions because she says that inevitably when writing for the general public, you will come across these overgeneralizations or simplifications, and you need to do that. And also, there are lots of areas that are still debated and hotly contested, and so she has to take a position for her book. And so she explains the debate and she directs you to different secondary reading, and I just love this kind of science writing. I also found out that Lisa Feldman Barret is one of the most cited neuroscientists. I just love that such a luminary takes the time to write these sorts of books. I think they are super helpful, they're super engaging, and I really, really recommend it. And finally, the only book that was on my actual TBR, but I'm happy I prioritized it, was Being Mortal by Atul Gawande. The subtitle for this is Illness, Medicine, and What Matters in the End. This was absolutely moving and thought-provoking, and I am just so grateful that I was made to read this by Danny at this point, and that I bought it, and that Literary Disco once again brought it to my attention. It's just such a necessary book. I think it's a book we should all be reading, maybe around our teens, but definitely throughout our 20s or 30s. I think it's super important as we get older, caring for people who are getting older and how to navigate that. In this book, Atul Gawande talks about medicine and death and how progress in medicine has made our relationship to death so fraught in a way that's actually unprecedented, and how death is seen as the enemy and almost unnatural, when in fact it's something that is as natural as can be. There are a number of cases here of people just navigating that as patients, as carers, as doctors. Atul Gawande talks about his own father's death and how he navigated that. He talks about other doctors' cases. This should be mandatory reading in college maybe, or I don't know, someone should make everyone read this because it's just so fundamental. It just makes you think about the future, but in a don't panic. It's good that we're having these conversations, and these conversations might be so hard to have, but we need to have them. And yeah, I cannot say anything else about the content except maybe clarify that this is a case-based book, which is something I sometimes have trouble with. I think it really depends on how it's handled. I think Gawande does it super well. I think his writing is really engaging and humane and tugs at your heartstrings, but it also becomes the doctor and scientist that he is when needed. So I really, really recommend it. Please put this in so many people's hands, especially people in their 20s, 30s, and even 40s. It's just such a key book that we all need to check out. So that was it. Those were all the books that I read in November. As I said, I did read a lot in November and I finished a lot of books. I also DNF'd one. And I am pleased about the number, but quality-wise, I feel like it was so up and down. There were many books I feel very lukewarm about. There were a couple books I feel kind of enraged about, and that does not make for great reading. In contrast, in December, I have finished very few books. I think at the time of recording this, I finished 3 or 4 at most, but like very, very slim books. And I don't even care because those have been great reads. So it's all about quality for me. Either way, I'm glad November's over. November was a really rough month for me, but December is shaping out to be great. I hope you're all staying safe and are able to celebrate the holidays in whatever capacity you do. Or if you don't celebrate at all, that's also fine. Most places have breaks, so I'm hoping you get a break. And if not, enjoy the few actual legal holidays that you have to recharge and eat some good food. Maybe watch a movie, have some hot chocolate or iced chocolate if you're watching this from the southern hemisphere. Treat yourself to something. So that's all. See you next time. Oh, let me know in the comments if you've read any of these books or what did you read for Nonfiction November. Super keen to know that. Let me live vicariously through you. First installment.